We come together tonight. We mourn the loss of a great man, Senator Hubert Humphrey, who taught us that we're a community and all our fates are linked. You, the people, and I, your president, have our futures intertwined. I'm sorry, but that's the way it is for a while. We have no choice but to act in that knowledge and spirit together. And, as the Bible says, we can move mountains. Thank you very much. I have nothing else to say, but live from New York, it's Saturday night.
Hello and welcome to the Not Ready for Primetime podcast. We're Laverne Seath and Shirley Robinson.
Here now, the podcast.
This week, we're talking about Season 3, Episode 9, with host Steve Martin and the musical guests The Dirt Band and Randy Newman. This show originally aired on January 21st, 1978. Brad, welcome to 1978.
1978, baby.
Yeah. Second time this season we have Steve Martin.
Not the last.
No, second time in 9 shows and not the last.
He will be back.
So not much has changed for Steve Martin since we saw him a few months ago.
Other than he just keeps getting bigger and bigger. I mean, he's still a huge deal. He's not promoting anything yet because the second album hasn't come out yet. So it's like he's not there to promote the album, although it's just getting publicity for it, I guess, when it does come out. You know, and some of his bits are obviously from the forthcoming album, which will be huge when it does come out. And I mean, you can't go wrong putting Steve Martin on. I'm sure he's on the Tonight Show like once a month at this point. So, but yeah, I mean, it's still Steve.
And it's still his sense of humor.
I'm saying it's his show. I mean, I'm pretty sure the whole reason we got the Dirt Band on this show is because Steve's on.
Maybe. I mean, again,
there's no other reason for the Dirt Band to be on this show. Come on.
Well, it's because they haven't added Nitty Gritty to their name yet.
No, they were Nitty Gritty. They had dropped Nitty Gritty at this point.
And I thought they went back to it later. No?
They do, like in the 80s, I think they go back to it. But this anyway.
Anyway, should we just get into it?
Let's do it. All right. Steve
Martin,
1978. Excited. Come on.
And it starts off with the Bruce Jenner joke. Didn't see that coming.
So is this the last 2 weeks I've had an O.J. Simpson joke and a Bruce Jenner joke? All right, 1977, baby.
Well, now it's 1978. And the cold open starts with the State of the Union, which had just happened, I think, 2 days before this episode aired.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, the 19th, yeah.
So Tom Davis is doing the voiceover of the intro of the State of the Union. And we get Dan as President Carter. We get John as Tip O'Neill behind him. And Bill as Vice President Walter Mondale behind him. And then they intercut Dan's speech with actual footage from the actual speech and members of the House not looking interested at different points. And I thought this was an interesting open. This felt like the first real Jim Downey piece that we see.
I don't know. I mean, I feel like we felt Downey's presence definitely in the last few Jimmy Carter pieces. But I did like, to your point, it is the first kind of State of the Union and recreating something political that wasn't a debate sketch, which was interesting. There's not much there, but that's the whole point. I mean, the whole point is it's a boring State of the Union, which I guess it was. I was looking up a little bit in like some of the reviews. It was short. It was like 45 minutes and just kind of a bland, boring speech. So they riff on that. And as you said, John and Bill are behind him. And I actually thought they were pretty good because they start, John starts chugging a beer at one point. Bill starts doing card tricks. They play rock, paper, scissors.
That was fun.
Punching each other in the show. And I thought it could have been very easy for the two of them to go over the top and overshadow it. And they didn't. I thought they actually did. They really rode that line well.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was a fun, interesting sketch. And it's something like now I think it's a little bit you take for granted because we see it so many times, whether it's a speech or the State of the Union or whatever. But I think trying to go back to 78, I think it was just very fresh to see that. And, the cutting of the actual reactions of people sitting in the stands or sitting in the seats and not being amused. And they had a bunch of chyrons underneath them from time to time, which was kind of funny. So I thought they did a good job of mixing the two. And overall, I enjoyed it.
I did too. I thought it was fun. I thought it was a fun, refreshing way to show actual political jokes that weren't, I don't know, so out of left field. This was taking a current event and turning it into something funny. I thought it was a good way to
I think
start the
this
show.
was, as far as like Jim Downey, political, Jimmy Carter jokes, I feel this was kind of like the softball of the episode. We get to it in Weekend Update where I think they take a much harder hit at him, which I thought was hilarious. And this was just more kind of like the ho-hum, get the episode running.
Well, from there, we go to our monologue with Steve. And I think last episode, we weren't really into his monologue, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But I enjoyed this one. He blames John. This actually took a little bit to set up, was blaming John for taking $50 out of his pocket. And then he brings John up on stage and immediately pushes him off stage and sees that it's in the other pocket.
Because I never put my money in this pocket, or my money's always in this pocket. I never put it in this pocket. Oh, okay. Segues right in. Yeah.
I liked the electrocution joke when he spills water and then grabs the
I
mic.
didn't dig that one. It was
Why?
Spills, yeah. I mean, it's not bad. I just didn't. I was like, okay, whatever. I like the John bit. He comes out and is like really playing into the wild and crazy guy shtick. He's got the walk going now and the arms moving and all that. He's really playing into it. But he goes into the thing about not paying taxes and all that kind of stuff. And he blatantly like suckers you into the excuse me line to like cap off the monologue with excuse me, like totally hoodwinks you into it.
You say, Steve, how can I be a millionaire and never pay taxes? First, get $1 million. Now, you say, Steve, what do I say to the tax man when he comes to my door and says, you have never paid taxes? 2 simple words. 2 simple words in the English language. I forgot. How many times do we let ourselves get into terrible situations because we don't say, I forgot? Let's say you're on trial for armed robbery. You say to the judge, I forgot armed robbery was illegal. Let's suppose he says back to you, you have committed a foul crime. You have stolen hundreds and thousands of dollars from people at random. And you say, I forgot? 2 simple words. Excuse me!
But he just commands the stage, which I feel like he didn't do as much the last time. This monologue is quintessential. It's just Steve Martin taking over the stage and just running with it. And there already is a different vibe of just whether it's looseness or familiarity, whether it's like that whole bit of bringing John on stage, but there is just something already. And I felt this the entire episode, way different than the episode 1 of this season, Steve Martin. Like, I really like this episode. I think it's got a great vibe to it. And you already get into this monologue of just the looseness and the funness of the whole episode comes out.
Yeah, and you start to see it in the cold open too. Like you said, with Bill and John, like they were just having fun, but not taking it over top. And you see it with Steve here. So
it's interesting. I was doing research and I found some stills, and I couldn't track down how true it was, but there's stills I found credited with Steve and Bill on stage together for the monologue. And it looks like it's what ends up being his 3rd appearance monologue with Bill Murray, which is, I think, is one of the best monologues of all time. But they're both Steve's wearing a different suit and Bill's not wearing the suit he's wearing that week. So I can't tell if it was dress from that and just mislabeled or whatever, but It was interesting, which again would play to that whole kind of looseness and fun vibe with the cast if they did that one, which we'll talk about more next time he hosts. But it's just the whole vibe of it is already feeling fun.
Yeah.
Getting into this.
It definitely is. And that fun vibe continues with the first commercial, which we've already seen, but we really enjoyed with Swill.
Yeah, who wouldn't take this one again?
Right. I don't know that we need to talk about it. We've already talked about it, but it's still good. Still fun.
Still as good as it was. Yep.
Yeah. And then we hit our first sketch, which is all about the mystery of Bigfoot. And John and Gilda are in their little cabin, and Steve comes as the forest ranger on the hunt for Bigfoot because there have been a lot of sightings of Bigfoot, but only through the blizzard. It's been really hard. And then the whole gag is that John and Gilda put their feet up on the table and they have giant feet. And John goes out to get wood from the wood pile and he puts on his big fur coat. That's the bit of this joke or this sketch. I thought it was fun. I mean, it was.
I'd say you're underplaying it. I was waiting to hear your thoughts on it because you're downplaying this sketch.
Well, honestly, my first thought was I enjoyed it, but I was also thinking, why is this the first sketch of the night?
I had that thought as well. And it took a little while to get there. I agree. Like what threw me off to begin with was like Steve had this weird delivery.
Yeah.
He had that kind of like out of breath, excited. You can't quite place it, but it was kind of weird. I'm like, what is he doing? Like, why is he going that way with this character? They had a funny line that they kept repeating where they're talking about from Moose Creek to Otter Valley. And they say it like 4 times. Like Steve's like, I've been looking from Moose Creek to Otter Valley. And John says it at one point.
Yeah.
And yeah, he's talking about how he's searching for Bigfoot. And you're kind of wondering where it's going because at this point, John and Gilda are sitting at the table the whole time. And so you're only seeing it from like tabletop up. And Steve comes in through the door and he's talking to them while he's standing. And then John kicks his foot up on the table. And it's like, oh, John has a big foot. I get the joke now. And you can see where it's going. And it was a really good reveal because they don't show it like halfway through the sketch where he like leans back in the chair and kicks his foot up. And it's like, okay. And then it's like, oh, they both do. They have big feet. Okay. And there's a couple nice lines where, the weather's bad. So Gilda's trying to ask Steve, oh, you should stay the night or hang tight. And he's like, oh, nice wood burning stove you have there. She goes, oh, Santa brought it for me. I woke up and found it in my stocking. Yeah, playing on the Bigfoot, and I think they tried another one where she's like, "You can spend the night and use one of my socks as a sleeping bag." Yeah, but it's not until John decides to get up and go out to chop wood, and as Steve's describing Bigfoot, and he's talking about a husky man with big footprints and a big like bear-like fur, and as you said, John's putting on the fur coat at all, and you can see where it's going, and then John walks out the door and. Steve looks out the window and goes, it's Bigfoot by the woodpile. Yeah. And then he's like, oh, no, that was your husband. I'm sorry. And he shoots.
That was Bigfoot after he shot him.
And he shoots with a tranquilizer gun. Yeah. Oh, and John walks in with the dart. I don't know. I smiled. I left this sketch smiling.
I mean, you just laughed describing this sketch to yourself.
It's one of those like silly, stupid sketches.
Yes.
That works.
Yep.
Because the whole joke and premise is you play it on John and Gilda having big feet.
Yes.
And he walks out and gets mistaken for Bigfoot and Steve shoots him for the wrong, there's not much else there, but it's the wrong word, but like it was cute. Like I like it was, I don't know. Like I again, the sketch ended. I wasn't laughing out loud, but I was smiling. Like I said, I'm just like, I enjoyed it.
I liked it. I thought it was fun. I knew what the joke was going to be right away. And I just felt like, okay, this is a great, I don't know. It wasn't one that I thought should lead off the show. That was my thought.
You're thinking the next sketch is what they probably should have led off with, though, I'm guessing.
Maybe. I mean, the next sketch, it brings kind of familiar characters, but they've only been on once. Mm-hmm. So it's the Fest Drunk Brothers, and it gets a decent applause when they first appear.
For the amount of applause it got the first time they were on, I thought it got a huge applause.
Yeah. My note was it starts strong and then kind of peters out because Cliff comes in, or Garrett, and talks to them for a little bit, and they make him a drink, and then the doorbell rings, and it's Jane and Lorraine, and they come in as Croatian sisters with John as their uncle, and the Fest Drunk Brothers are repulsed because they're not American. And this was all set up by a computer.
Computer to find foxes, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, Cliff, get out of here now. Some dates are coming over from computer dating to meet us. And you cannot be here, for we will want to have sex with them soon.
You guys got some action going, huh? You didn't tell me that, man. Fix me a drink. I'll finish it, and then, then I'll split. Right? Okay.
Oh, now are the foxes.
Cliff, don't wait here right away. Look who it is. 2 swinging chicks.
Take off your coat so we can see your big American breasts.
Don't worry about birth control devices for sex. We have many.
Hello. We are knowing something now. I am telling you that you are young and you're that fest drunk. We have selected your computer cards, and tonight we are dating you. That's right. And sorry to be placing a bum trip on my mind, but before having sex, you will be buying us an expensive meal and many Pepsis.
You'll be pardoning me for a moment. These are not American foxes.
I blame myself.
We are Croatian sisters, Vodka and Babzina Chorvu, who are jumping 2 years ago off Soviet fishing trawler off the coast of Maine. We're swimming 2 weeks with our uncle Kravosh, who is with us now also as well. That's right, Uncle Kravosh! Come in and take
So I thought it was strange. I thought it was weird that it's, the second time that we've seen the Festrunk brothers, and you bring in other characters in Jane and Lorraine and John with Eastern European accents.
I had the same thought afterwards, and then I had to remind myself, at this point in time, you don't know this is going to be a reoccurring character. They've done it once, and in their minds, this might be the only time they ever do it again. Because I had the same thought.
But that's not my point. My point is more of like, you don't have the familiarity with these characters to play off of them and keep adding to that world of strange characters.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they do it, because Lorraine and Jane are just the female versions of the Festrunk brothers.
Right. And your thinking is this would have been funnier like time 5 or 6, right? Not
Yes.
time number 2.
Yeah,
That's what I'm saying. And what I'm saying at this point, I don't think they were thinking there'd be a time 5 or 6. They're thinking this is probably only the second time we ever do this character again. Because they weren't really redoing reoccurring characters with hosts at that point. You got to remember Buck had a couple, but he'd also been on 5 times at that point. So I had the same thought. I was like, this would be played much better farther down the road.
Yeah.
But then I had to remind myself they probably weren't thinking that at this point. Because yes, it's the Jane and Lorraine are pretty much the Croatian version of their characters. And I think it's a genius concept of having them basically meet their equals, looking for American men and being upset. It just, yes, to your point, knowing what we know now, this would have played much better later in the life of these characters.
Yeah.
That being said, how great is Jane?
Yeah. Yes.
She does this bit where they come in and they're introducing themselves. And she takes off her coat and she does this like grabbing motion, like she's grabbing Steve's balls. And she does it like over and over again. And she makes this like grotesque face. It's hilarious.
Yes. She was great.
She's great in this sketch. And I think I was trying to remember too. I was trying to think like what happened between the first time we saw this and now, because like you said, they come in and there's a huge reaction to these characters, which we haven't seen. I think a lot of it has to be, Steve was playing this wild and crazy guy character a lot, right. I think on appearances and from the last time we saw him to now, whether it's on like, Tonight Show or whatever. And he's even talked about, I think in this one, Jim Downey gets into the writing a little bit more with Marilyn Suzanne Miller and him to really pull his character out. And that's where you get a lot of like the walk in and the arms moving. And you can tell Steve has like dialed it up a lot from the first time they did this. They're much more animated and over the top than they were in the first one. And I think a lot of that has to come from Steve and Steve's stand up and what he was doing with this character at the point. And then you get it in here with Dan and you get, like say, Downey and Marilyn Suzanne Miller helping with creating this sketch. I mean, there's a lot going on here with all of that. And John's in the mix, as you mentioned. Like John's in the mix as like their cousin or uncle.
Yeah.
Their uncle who's swinging.
And then he takes off with the Festrunk brothers at the end.
Yeah. It's almost like there's too much. Again, because I think they probably didn't think there were going to be many more incarnations of these characters. So they shoved all this stuff into number 2 because there's so much going on. Like, I don't know. I don't think you needed John in this sketch.
I totally agree with you. Yeah.
Like he didn't add that much. It was fun. You had enough with Garrett and the women going after Garrett and ripping his shirt off by the end. Like they literally like rip his shirt off because they want to have sex with Garrett. And then that's the whole point of the sketch is the women are going to leave the guys and go for Garrett. So the brothers take the uncle and they're going to go out swinging to the bars and they get ready to leave. But and I had the note at the end too. I think this would have played better in hindsight farther down the road after, like you said, we knew these characters better. We'd seen more of their interactions with the American women and who these characters were.
Right.
But I think it's just remarkable the growth that these characters in this sketch has made from its first outing till this time.
But I think what's interesting is thinking about this character that Steve had created this catchphrase, wild and crazy guy, and went with that. And they developed a character out of it for SNL. Doing so with Dan makes everything stronger and I think better, right? Because I think
I agree.
Dan takes this character to places where if you paired him up with Bill or John, it would be very different. but Dan like lets these characters develop a rapport and lets them grow. And I think expanding on it is so much easier with Dan.
Well, because I think to your point, Dan disappears into characters better.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to not see John. It's kind of hard to not see Bill when they play characters. So Dan is just, that's why he's so good.
Yeah.
Is he just will get into that character and commit, and you just believe it. And he's a great compliment to Steve in this. Like what you're saying, like their energies and their deliveries and their mannerisms and just their vibe is just, it's a perfect fit.
Yeah. Well, from there we go to Steve's childhood friends, the Dirt Band. I will say Steve comes on to introduce his old friends, and he quickly threw on a suit. Like he got rid of the Fest Drunk Brother outfit very quickly and throws on a suit, and they come on to play On Loose with the Blues. So are you familiar with the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band, now the Dirt Band, later the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band?
I mean, yeah, I know him somewhat. Yeah. And I mean, I know Steve has a long history with them. You know, like I think Steve's manager is also the manager of the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band and brother of the lead singer, banjo player, whatever. And so they've had that connection throughout the years.
You know, this wasn't like a big hit song or anything, but it was fun. They're a decent band.
This was on their upcut. So they do have an album coming out later this year called The Dirt Band, their first album under the new name. So I guess, they did have something to promote. But I don't know. I kind of dug this song.
Yeah.
I don't think it was a very good song, but for some reason I enjoyed it. I don't know. Like I dug it.
Same way. Same for me. I wasn't prepared for what it was. Like I didn't know the song, and as I listened to it, I was like, "Yeah, these guys are good. They're a tight band." Yeah,
the singer has like a very 1978 kind of voice. No,
absolutely.
I could. Who sings like the theme song from Fast Times at Ridgemont High? It's like that. It sounds like that guy.
Everything about these guys just exudes 1978. Like the outfits, the haircuts, the facial hair. Everything, the collars on their suits and shirts. Yeah.
What was their harmonica player doing with his body? Did that strike you?
Really sure.
But do you know what I'm talking about? He's like playing, and his body is like gyrating, and I can't tell to what beat.
It was not anything that we were listening to.
There's just so much going on in this tune. That's why I was enjoying it. I don't know. Like I said.
Yeah.
I'll give you two facts. One on this band. Did you know that they toured the Soviet Union the year before and were the first American band allowed to tour?
Band. Yes, I did know that.
And do you know who else used to be in the band back in the 60s when they first started?
Jackson Browne?
Yes.
Yeah. I think we read the same Wikipedia page.
Probably. I read two. I read Jackson's to back up my research on the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band. And that Wikipedia page also said he was in the band. So it must be true.
Well, yeah. If they're linked, can't be wrong.
Listen, if Steve Martin says he wants the Dirt Band on, you're putting the Dirt Band on.
I'm fine with it after that performance. That was fine.
Yeah. That was fine. It's not like he came out and played with the band or anything.
Right.
Right. That's just obnoxious.
Well, the harmonica player wasn't the only one gyrating his body weirdly, because in the commercial for Body Floss, there was a whole lot of gyrating going on. So
I thought you were going to jump right to Garrett. I see where you're going with this.
Yeah.
That's true.
Next, there's a live commercial for Body Floss with Steve as the spokesperson. It's a floss that makes you clean even after you thought you were clean. And it's just footage of Bill, Jane, and Garrett, and then Gilda, I think, all rubbing their body with floss, which is essentially rope in all different places. And Garrett really gets into it.
Well, we got to stop for a minute because they're in the bathroom. So it's Gilda and Bill. And you're like, okay, this makes sense. And Bill comes out of the shower and he's got the body floss and towel wrapped around. He's body flossing. And then Garrett pops out of the shower. Like, can we just address this for a moment, please?
It was funny. It was absurd.
Because for some reason, that was weirder to me than Jane just coming in from off camera in a towel and body flossing. But the fact that Garrett came from inside the shower, I was like, what's going on?
You know what? I thought everyone was just like, well, this is absurd. Let's just whatever.
Well, it was a floss party.
Yeah. That's right.
For some reason, that made Jane just showing up okay when she's like, floss party? I'm in. But Garrett was just like, the Garrett popping out of the shower just got me. And then I got to give credit. They do the classic fake freeze frame at the end.
Yeah.
Where they pause and everyone stops and freezes for the voiceover. I don't know. It was silly and funny.
Silly. Yeah.
It was simple and easy to do. Like, how can you got to knock this?
It was fun and silly. Yeah. That's it. That's all it had to be. Didn't have to be anything else.
No, exactly.
Then we get coming up on Weekend Update at 12 o'clock which I thought was odd that Dan comes in with that. And also Jane gets dressed very quickly again. Quick turnaround on the costume.
True.
Yeah. So they start by welcoming Fred Silverman to NBC, which plays into SNL's history later on. And then it feels like they're a little more settled than they have been with the two of them this week of going back and forth between the jokes.
I agree.
I don't think there was anything stellar, really. There was like a joke about the head of the FBI, Larry Flint, and Oral Roberts.
And Oral Roberts changing his name to Oral Sex.
Yeah.
It's funny. It was good.
Sure.
This is the part, though, I liked when they started laying into Jimmy Carter.
Uh-huh.
They make another Amy Carter nanny joke.
Yeah.
About, their nanny's a convicted felon. So they're still playing that card. But then they go into this, like, how's it going for Jimmy Carter? And they, like, list this, like, run of bad things, either personally or in his presidency going on. I was just like, okay.
Right.
There you go. I liked it. I thought it was pretty good. It felt like very downy of just like cutting into him. Yeah. And I liked it.
I liked the Leo the Lion from MGM joke getting a drunken disorderly when they had a lion who was obviously tranked.
The real question, Gary, is we go to our correspondent, and this time it is Roseanna Dana.
Well, Jen, Mr. Richard Fader of New York City writes in and says, Dear Roseanna Dana, I got no heat. What should I do? Well, Mr. Fader, I want to help you because I know how you feel. Once I didn't have no heat and I was afraid I was going to come down with the flu. I had a temperature, I had the chills, I didn't have too many blankets in my apartment, so I went outside to get some soup because it's supposed to be good for you if you're clogged up. I go to the restaurant and I ordered soup. Well, I got it, and wouldn't you know, there was a hair in it. Can you imagine that? It was about this long. I thought I was going to die. Now, let me ask you this. Did you ever eat a hamburger and there's a hard thing in it? You know, it's like a toenail. And you know, it's not part of the hamburger, but you separate the meat and the pickle and the lettuce and the tomatoes all at one side of your mouth, and finally you get on your tongue that little thing, and it's like a bone. But it's not a bone. I keep asking myself, Roseanna Dana, if they can make a coffee you like without caffeine, why can't they make a hamburger you like with no toenails? And wait a minute, what about when you get some fried chicken and you got in there, you got a thigh, you got a breast, you got a leg, you got a wing, and then you got this other part that's got about 2 inches of breading on it, you know? And after you eat all the breading off of it, you don't know what you got there. And did you ever eat roast beef that had a rainbow on it? You know what I mean? It's blue. How did they get that color? Did someone leave the beef out in the rain?
What'd you think?
I thought it was a great start to Roseanna Dana.
Yeah.
I was excited to see her. She did not disappoint.
Mm-hmm.
I know that she gets better and I like her more later. So that was good. But it was refreshing to see her at the desk as this character. Her interaction with Jane is not much different, but I thought all in all, I really enjoyed seeing Roseanna Dana. How about you?
Yeah, it was fun to watch the first one.
Yeah.
Because, you know, if you notice, the crowd doesn't really know what to do or how to take her. And then I had to think of it, aside from Gilda playing Emily Latella, we don't get a lot of characters. We haven't gotten a lot of characters on the update desk. It's like John playing a version of John, Lorraine playing Lorraine.
Right.
Maybe there's been like 2 or 3 times now in 2.5 seasons where there's been someone's come on as a blatant character. So I don't think the audience knew how to take this person really. You know, they probably didn't remember that they saw her in a sketch, you know, a month and a half ago, like at that random Charles Grodin sketch at the end of the episode. You know, they're feeling the character out. You know, again, it's the first one. It's much like Emily Latella, you know, they're seeing what works, what doesn't work. I thought it went a little long, but I understood why. Because again, you're feeling it out. You're getting your legs. This is one that Zweibel did with her again, and he would do these Roseanna Danas with Gilda throughout the first few years. For whatever reason, I liked the Jane yelling at her and interrupting her. For some reason, it felt a little bit better than the Emily Latilla back and forth. So I like that.
Yeah, it was a little different. I don't know. I think it was because Roseanna Dana kind of stands up to her. I mean, doesn't really fight back at her, but also doesn't take her shit
she's got the gruffness to her that Emily didn't. So
Yes.
you could buy the yelling and the back and forth a little bit more. Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, this was fun. It was a good first showing from Rosanna.
Don't worry, she'll be back 15, 16 times. So don't worry.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. Not a horrible weekend update.
It was pretty short too.
That's true. But like you mentioned, Jane was almost back to season 2 form. It felt like she was hitting her stride. Dan was pretty good. I thought Dan was okay. And as you mentioned, Gilda was something new and different. So there's a lot of things working on this one.
Totally agree. It was a good, tight weekend update. And I think that's what sometimes when they let it run off the rails and bring in multiple people and keep up with the jokes and everything, and it goes too long, it just isn't working yet. So this was a good one. This was fun. This was short. You know what else is short? Short People by Randy Newman. So he comes on with his 4 background singers. I really like the song. I think we've gone over. I like Randy Newman.
You have to like Randy Newman. I do as well.
Yeah.
You have to like Randy Newman to like this, which I did.
I liked when his backup singers lowered their mic stands and sang as Short People at the end of the song.
Well, his backup singers it's the Dirt Band. Those are the dudes from the Dirt Band. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was fun. I thought this was good. And then he addresses the backlash that he had been receiving from the song Short People, which, are you familiar with the backlash of Short People?
Yeah. Apparently it was a big brouhaha back in 1977, 78.
Yeah. Radio stations didn't play the song. They banned the song because people were in such an uproar, because people don't get sarcasm, Brad.
I thought you were going to say because people love short people.
No. And then he rolls right into Rider in the Rain.
Not as great.
Not as great.
Not as great.
I think when he mentioned his backlash, he said this song should only offend cowboys or something to that.
Yeah, something like that. After he gave her, what do you call it, a raspberry? It was kind of cool. I did like how he finished the first song, and then he you must be friends with Lorne if he's allowing you not only to do 2 songs in a row, but in between, take a moment and speak to the audience. Go ahead. Give yourself a minute.
He was like their de facto host of the New Orleans show, so they trust Randy Newman.
Okay, and let's talk about where he was, because remember when we saw the New Orleans show, and we were like, he's not really anybody yet. He hadn't had any hit records. He wasn't like a big star. And then this is almost a year later, 11 months later. Now is his last record to come out. I mean, Steve introduces it as the number 1 record in the country, which is a little false. I think it was top 10. It reached like number 9. And yeah, Short People was, I think it was the lead track, and I think only single from the album. And it was a top number 2. I think it made number 2 on the charts as a single. So it was kind of interesting to see that fact. Like last time we saw him, we were commenting on this was like Lorne's buddy, and that's why he was on the show. And now he legitimately had a hit, and his career was rising. But I don't know, get him in, play 2 tunes from his album that was out and doing well. I don't know. You could have stopped at 1 though, I think.
Well, I mean, we'd realize at the end of the show, he got 2 songs. The Dirt Band got 2 songs. You probably didn't need 4 songs tonight.
Yeah.
We could have used another sketch like we got next, which is a classic. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's a classic Family Feud sketch with Bill as Richard Dawson. Do you remember Richard Dawson?
Bill Murray playing Richard Dawson.
Yeah.
I'm all in. As soon as I was like, I cannot wait for this sketch.
Right. And it's great because if you remember Richard Dawson, he even is introduced as being from Hogan's Heroes.
Hogan's Heroes.
Which is hilarious. And Bill comes on as Richard Dawson. He has an accent for maybe 3 words, and then he's just like, screw it. And he seems to lose it.
I will say, as excited as I was to see him do Richard Dawson, it might not have lived up to what I wanted. It was still really good. It was still really good, though.
I thought it was really good.
He was great with the pinky rig. The constant playing with, again, if you know Richard Dawson, you used to watch it on Family Feuds, he does the pinky rig really great. He might not have the accent down, or like you said, he loses it 90% of the time.
Right.
But he's got the mannerisms, and the pinky rig thing was really good.
He was really good.
Yeah.
And he introduces the first family, who are, I don't have a last name, but it's Steve, Gilda, and John. And
I think they're the Mel family, I think.
Mel family.
Mel, yeah.
He also does a great job, like Richard Dawson, of kissing all of the women.
Well, and you lead up, we're getting to that. We're getting to the end of that line.
And Steve introduces himself as being a spokesman for the Romaine Lettuce Growers Association of California and just talks about lettuce. And then he introduces their opponents, the Coneheads. So it's a Conehead sketch, and we get, Dan and Jane and Lorraine, and he...
Yes, Family Feud, yet only 3 members per family.
Wow. Come on, don't be picky. The Coneheads on the Family Feud, that's all you need.
It's season 3, man. These guys had extras out the wazoo, or could have added 2 more on each side.
You have to pay the extras if they say anything.
It's 3 more Cohen. They didn't have 3 more Cohens either, probably.
That's true. Yeah.
Or 2 more Cohens.
And again, Beldar says he's a driving instructor, does all of that. He kisses Jane, and then he says to Lorraine, he's like, well, you're French, so I'll give you a French kiss.
She just opens her mouth.
This was fun. This was great.
It was good.
I like
I mean, before we even get into the sketch, just the absurdness that the Coneheads would somehow make it on the Family Feud somehow is just so funny. Like, just how does this even happen? I think it on the show. I just think it's hilarious.
But that's what I love about it is like, it's an absurd setup.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think it works. Like there are some, we see some other absurd setups that don't necessarily work as well.
Right. This one's pretty good.
And I thought this one works. Yeah. I thought Steve and Gilda and John as the other family were great. Like they were funny.
Yeah.
And then the Coneheads. Yeah. In this absurd situation. Right.
Yeah. They steal it. Yeah.
Protoid capsules.
Protoid capsules. Oh, that's an interesting answer. I never would have said that, but you said that, big guy. So show me protoid capsules. Well, tough luck there, Beldar. That's a very interesting head you have there. What do I do? Break it open and let all the presents fall out? All right. Mel family, you might be able to steal this one if you can tell me something that the audience says people like to bite.
Romaine lettuce.
Okay. Show me romaine lettuce. All right. One person said romaine lettuce. You're on the board. Now, Mel family, are you going to pass or play?
Play. That's a tough question. I can only think of romaine lettuce. We're going to pass.
All right, Primat. What else do you think our survey showed people like to bite?
Organically inactive meat or vegetable matter between 2 starch planes.
It's a long walk back to France if you don't get this one right, Primat. All right. Show me organically inactive meat or vegetable matter between 2 starch planes. Sandwich. All right. That's acceptable. Okay. 12 people said sandwich. All right, Connie. Something that people like to bite.
The big one.
Bite the big one. All right. Does our audience bite the big one? Well, we all want to know that one. We're going to find out right now. Show me the big one. All right.
This was great. This was so much fun to watch.
And again, they put the Coneheads in a new situation. They're doing another great job of finding a new way something new to do with them. And it somehow keeps them fresh after we've seen them, 5, 6, 7 times. It's still working.
And these characters play so well to answering questions in really precise ways. And especially Dan, as he talks about these things and gives answers, is just perfect for this.
They all do a great job.
Yeah,
Dan, Jane, and Lorraine, the 3 of them, to what you're saying about giving the answers and again, it's the writing, big Tom Davis piece here. Just it's written so well. And there's like little things like when, they bring the dads up to answer the first buzzer or whatever. And like Beldar walks right up to Bill and like gets right in his face. He's like, right over here, big man. Come on.
Yeah.
And he does it again at the end for fast money. Gets right. It's just those little things, and the deliveries are great and the performances are really fun. It's just, this is a really long sketch, but it works.
Yeah.
Like they go through the whole thing. They do the whole back and forth of the round. Then they bring Beldar down, do fast money, like do the sign off. Like at one point I'm like, this sketch is still going, but I never lost interest.
No,
I enjoyed the whole thing.
Yeah. The whole thing was meaty. There wasn't anything to cut. It was funny throughout. It worked. I think the fact that Steve had this character that he like gives the answer of romaine, and that's an answer. And they're like, do you want to play or pass? And he's like, I can't think of anything other than romaine. We'll pass. Like, it's just funny in these
back and
little
forth with
absurd
him and
ways.
John when they're trying to steal it.
Yeah.
And John's like, John, he's like, you never listen to me. Just for once in your life, listen to me.
Yes.
And then he does, and they don't get it. And then he hits him upside the head. Oh, that's the other thing too. Every time Bill goes to John, he's like grabbing his cheek and slapping him across the face.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
There's a lot of good stuff in this one.
Yeah, it was great. It was fun.
Yeah.
And it didn't feel long. Like you were saying, it was long, but it didn't feel long to me.
No.
However, something that I thought was long and was absurd, but didn't necessarily work was our next sketch. which
People
was
like this sketch.
What If? Yeah, I don't know why. Because it's a television program called What If, hosted by Joan Cage. Again, a really quick change for Jane, going from Conehead to Joan
Jane
Cage.
is a talk show host. This episode has everything.
And she has two guests, Garrett and Bill. And their question they're answering this week is from a 9-year-old who says, what if Napoleon had B-52 bombers at the Battle of Waterloo? And then we cut to a simulation of John as Napoleon. Lorraine plays Josephine. And then they get into a B-52 bomber with Dan, who goes through everything. He has a Southern accent for this, and he goes through everything about the B-52 bomber. It was, I don't know. I think this is what I was talking about when I said it's absurd, but this one doesn't really nail it for me.
Right.
Like, I like the absurd stuff. I think the premise of this was much better than the actual execution of it. What did you think?
I didn't love it. I mean, I enjoyed it, but this is one like of. It's a series. They do these, I think, 3 or 4 times over the original era. I hadn't seen it in a while, so it felt new to me. You know, it has a lot of things I like. It's got a lot of the cast in it, which I was like, this is cool. It starts as a talk show. I did like Jane made a flub where she said Garrett was a graduate of Howard University. I was like, nice mess up, Jane. But then they say, oh, there's a dramatization. I was like, okay, nice. Like I was all into it. I was like, great. I want to see what happens.
Yes.
And I didn't love the dramatization as much as I wanted to. And
Agreed.
I don't have a good reason why. I think you need to buy into the silliness and the absurdity. And it took me a little while to buy into the lack of the realness of it. Because they play it as a legit dramatization, as if Napoleon legitimately, like there's no joke. There's no wink, wink. It's Napoleon legitimately touring a B-52 bomber.
Right.
And for some reason, I couldn't buy into that right away. And that's, I think, what kept me from loving this.
Yeah, I feel like you didn't need the whole setup of the talk show format, really. Like in some ways, I was thinking this could work in the vein of like a bad sketch, right? You know,
like,
if
what
you
do you
set
do?
up a what if is like a, this isn't a
what do you
Mr.
do? What do you do? What do you do? A title crawl instead?
No. What I'm thinking is, like a Mr. I know this isn't Michael Donahue, but like a Mr. Mike sketch, you have someone come in, like you could create a character with Dan or something and be like, I was thinking, what if blah, blah, blah. And then it turns into like a fantasy in his head. And then you go to Napoleon on a plane or something like that. I don't know. But I just felt like the setup with Jane and Garrett and Bill was
Jane as a talk show host. Hello.
I understand that. But that whole, the few minutes that took up, I think took away from it.
I see what you're saying.
Go right to
Maybe.
the absurd. That's what I'm saying.
I know. Yeah, I know. I get your point. And maybe that's what it was for me too, a little bit. Cause I was like kind of into this talk show vibe.
Uh-huh.
And it takes that turn out of nowhere for the dramatization, which was just so absurd.
Yeah.
But
I liked like I said, I liked the idea. So I think if you started out absurd and went there, like turned it up rather than cutting to it, it would have been better. I don't know.
I like the outro of when they go in our next episode. What if God and Superman got into a fight? But again, I mean, by no means is this a bad sketch. Like this is still a very good sketch. It's funny. Like I don't know. I love this episode. I think this is a very good episode. I don't think we've talked about anything poor yet. Like this being one of our least favorite sketches. Put this on other episodes, it's a top sketch. Like there's just so much good stuff going on in this episode. that the quote unquote bad ones are still good.
I don't know. I don't know that this
I like this one.
would have been my best bit on any episode other than, I don't know, Mary Kay Place. You really liked the outro from What If. Did you like Steve's intro of Gary Weiss's film where he says, you know, Gary Weiss from such films as, well, he's done a lot of work on the Saturday Night Show.
That was good. It was funny.
And Steve sets it up that he and Gary Weiss were in LA for a few days whenever, and they made a film, and it's Steve driving around Bel Air and Beverly Hills. And he says, I'm going to take you to see some of my close personal friends and their homes in Beverly Hills and Bel Air. And they go and buy a map of the stars and then stand outside of different.
And the woman like kind of recognizes him, but she can't remember his name. She's like, what is he? He's like, George Carlin.
Yeah. And then they just go to the homes of Jerry Lewis, Ray Kroc, which was funny, Carl Reiner. And he just stands outside and he's like, Jerry.
I was waiting for Carl Reiner to come out too.
I was
like,
too.
When he said Carl Reiner, I wrote down, I was like, yes. And I was like waiting for it to happen. And then
Yes.
it didn't. I was like,
I know.
Damn it.
I know.
Instead, we got Rin Tin Tin.
Yeah, which I thought that was pretty funny. They go to a dog barking and he's like, oh, this is Rin Tin Tin's house.
Hi, Rin. He's like waving at him.
Yeah.
Hi.
I thought this was okay. This was fine. It wasn't crazy, but very good.
Gonna say it. One of my favorite Gary Weiss films.
Yeah, I think it has to be.
It was funny. I can't knock it. It was funny.
Yeah.
But you know what though? It's a man on the street piece.
Yes,
Like
exactly.
those are the ones he actually does very well on, whether it's Buck or Steve, or even like we did the novelty act. When he does kind of man on the street stuff, I feel like that's his bread and butter. He really hits them. And this one is just, one of my favorite, I got to say.
Yeah, I agree. Totally. This was a good one. And it's totally it's all Steve. Like, can't give Gary Weiss too much credit for this, but.
My God, man, come on.
What? I
will give Gary Weiss credit for this. I will. It wasn't all Steve.
You waiting for that Gary Weiss phone call to invite you out to dinner? Well, Steve comes back on stage in person this time and joins the Dirt Band to play their song White Russia, which was written in Russia when they were in the Soviet Union, as you mentioned.
Was it now?
Yes. Did he say that in the intro, or did I read that? I may have read that somewhere.
You must. I didn't. I think you read it somewhere.
Oh. Anyway, yeah, they come on and play White Russia with Steve playing the banjo in tandem with the lead singer of the Dirt Band, and this is a pretty long song. I was surprised.
Yeah.
Did you like the first song better?
I did like the first song better. This was an instrumental, so that's always tricky. Can we talk about the banjo player's nails for a quick second? That's what's his name. That's the manager's brother, John McEwen, or whatever, however you say his name. But I mean, do you see how long his nails were? Like, those nails are for two things: either picking or doing blow, or both.
Or this is 1978. I'm pretty sure it's both.
White Russia. It's all coming together now.
Ah, see?
Yeah, I don't know. They're playing, and then all of a sudden, a saxophone comes out of nowhere.
Yes, that was kind of jarring when the saxophone started playing.
Because he comes out of nowhere.
Yeah.
But then he plays a clarinet. And then he comes out and plays dual recorders.
Yes. 2 recorders at the same time. That was impressive.
You better be cutting a clip of this in, because this is amazing.
Just the recorders.
Yes.
Yeah. Steve does mention it in the intro that they wrote this in Russia.
Oh, that's where it was. Yeah, I don't know. I didn't love it, but I will not let you bring me down on this episode. So I'm going to say it was a good song.
I'm not going to bring you down talking about White Russia. That's fine. This was fine. This was like again, I don't know that we needed 4 musical numbers tonight. I think this would have been the first one that I would cut. But to your point earlier, Steve in with the Dirt Band.
If Steve Martin wants to play banjo with the band, he's going to play banjo with the band.
Yeah.
It's going to happen.
This is what you have to do, and that's okay. And he's still playing the banjo 45 years later.
I believe I told you the first time I met Steve, via the Zoom. Son of a bitch has a banjo in his background just sitting there on a stand. It's like, we get it, Steve. You play a banjo. Enough. Ay, ay, ay.
Yeah. And that's it. That's our
That's
show.
it.
They come out for good nights. Nothing
Very
really
quick.
of note
No,
there.
very
Yeah.
quick.
Yeah.
The only thing I'd say is closing credits. We see Brian Del Murray and Don Novello. Their first episodes credited as writers that we mentioned a couple weeks ago. So they're on the show now.
Yeah. And you love this episode. This is up there for you. I mean, this is probably
I really liked it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't put it above Charles Grodin.
No,
but I
agree.
really liked this episode. I thought it was really fun. I thought they had really good sketches. I don't think there were any misses. Like we mentioned a couple times, even the sketches we didn't necessarily like, I thought in general were good, above average. And it seemed like Steve, and compared to the last time we saw him, was just, like I said, either more relaxed or into the flow of things. It just felt like a more natural fit for him this episode than the season premiere.
Yeah.
And I think that vibe just carried itself through the whole episode. I think the writing was pretty quality. I thought maybe the Bigfoot sketch was a little weak, but it was fun. Like it wasn't meant to be like a geniusly written script. It was a fun, stupid little sketch that I thought was really funny.
Yeah, I agree with you. My only comment on that one really was like, I didn't know that it needed to be the first sketch of the night, but yeah, no, I agree with what you're saying.
It's kind of almost like a reverse of the Buck Henry episode that we loved and we thought it started like out of the gates on fire and then petered off. This one kind of started a little bit slow, the opening and the monologue and that first sketch. But then like once the Fest Drunk Brothers came on, it just felt like it was like boom, 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 boom. We had a good weekend update, which didn't slow things down.
Right.
It was fun. It was fun.
It was fun. It's interesting for you to say that this episode was fun with 4 songs in it, especially because it's the Dirt Band.
I liked their first song. And again, I really like Randy Newman, so I really enjoyed seeing Short People. Yeah. But his second song was not very good, and the last song was kind of whatever. But you're right. Even with that, I think this was a really fun show.
Yeah, that's great. And not the last time we're going to see Steve Martin this season.
Nope, not this season. We'll be back. Oh, God. Wait till that episode. Woo.
We had to wait 8 weeks for him between these 2 episodes, and we have to wait 9 weeks between the next one. So
all right.
It'll be a bit. Well, Brad, what are your best bits?
It was funny, and you kind of touched on this a little bit, but it's kind of where we try to figure out best bits, and it's like looking at them in just, the show itself, but then at some points, a lot of times we contextualize it in like the arc of the whole first 5 seasons.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing from this show that I would say is all-time classic, top 10 sketches, there's nothing like A-list, but like everything is like B plus. You know what I mean? That's why I enjoyed it. There are no C's, like everything. I don't know if there's any A sketches, but everything is top notch. So it just of this show, I think the Fest Drunk Brothers, even though we know down the road there are better ones, I think Fest Drunk Brothers, and I thought the Coneheads Family Feud, they're both, I thought were great in their own right. And again, we've seen better Coneheads, but those were the 2 best things I thought of this episode.
That's interesting. I think the Family Feud Coneheads was my best bit, like hands down for me. I also think that was like an A sketch. I thought it was really solid. It was a little long, but I think it was really solid all the way through. And you got good performances from everyone in the cast except for Garrett. And they were all really good. And I thought the writing was good. So that sketch, I think that's a classic. I just love it.
No, you're right. Like I said, that's and I like the Fest Drunk one. Like I said, again, knowing everything you said about it, looking back, that plays better like as the last Fest. Like if that was the last one we ever saw, it would be, I think, funnier because you've taken that journey with them. But Jane was fantastic. Lorraine was great. And they just accelerated from the first time we saw them.
Yes. I think Steve and Dan definitely turning up their characters.
Yeah.
Was great. Yeah. That was it. I mean, that's a really strong show.
It was a good show. It was a very good show.
Especially last time we saw Steve Martin, we were not walking away from that saying it was a great show at all.
It's true.
So
it's true.
This was a good bounce back for him.
Cannot wait for the next one.
9 more weeks. Next week, we'll be talking about season 3, episode 10, with host Robert Klein and musical guest Bonnie Raitt. Until then, good night and have a pleasant tomorrow.
Good night and have a pleasant tomorrow.
The Not Ready for Primetime podcast is a Two Pints Productions production. Produced and edited by Brad and Gary. Thought about by Brad and Gary. Please rate and review. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.